Alright, so for this part of the class, we're going to be talking about the commas and the semicolons. Now, semicolons can be used to separate two independent clauses. So, what that means is that you can write down a phrase or just write down something, and instead of separating it with a period, you would put the semicolon. But keep in mind that because you can put the semicolon, you can also read both of those sentences as if they were their own. Okay? So I want somebody to read this out loud. Yeah, go for it. Thank you. Good job. Okay, so that was from the book Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. And yeah, so you notice that she uses a semicolon in that caption right there, right? So let's read both sentences individually and see if they make sense, okay? So, sadly, my sense of justice would not allow me to make this sacrifice. Instead, let's replace it with a period now. I'd rather be right than be happy. Okay, so notice how notice how both work as if they were, they both work if you take them apart. They work as their own sentences. Right in the beginning, after sadly, we see a comma. Sadly alone does not make its own sentence. It works as a pause when you're talking or when you're reading in your mind, but it's not going to make both the phrases that were separated by that comma, they're both not going to become their own sentences. If they're on their own, it doesn't work. It doesn't work phonetically, how we hear things, and just when you're reading, or like in the basic structure of a sentence, just the word sadly alone, it's not a sentence. So a single word doesn't contain enough information to present an idea or a concept or its own independent clause, as we would call it. But if we read it just alone, I'd rather be right than happy, that works fine. So that's something that we want to, again, the semicolon can be used to separate two independent clauses. It can be more than two. Another way that we can also use a semicolon is where it can be used to separate items where commas are being used. So when we write down Los Angeles, California, we would write it Los Angeles, comma, California, comma, CA, right? So if we were going to write another sentence, or sorry, another city, so we would separate it with a semicolon. Semicolon, so Los Angeles, comma, California, semicolon, Tempe, Arizona, semicolon, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Because the semicolon works because we're using it to separate items where the commas were already being used. We're using it to list things that carry a comma. Okay? So for this assignment, I want everybody to write one or two sentences where you're using a comma and a semicolon. So again, keep that in mind. I'm just want to make sure. Let's read it again. Sadly, comma, my sense of justice would not allow me to make this sacrifice. So that's one idea. We can use a period or we can use a semicolon. Now, the reason we would use a semicolon is because it still carries on a trait from the sentence before. So in that same idea where justice wouldn't allow her to make that sacrifice, she's still talking about her thought about it. So that's where the semicolon was used, because if she would have put a period, that alone can take another direction. But it didn't. She wanted to stick to the same thing. So because it related directly to that first independent clause, it works. That's why you can continue with I'd rather be happy, or sorry, I'd rather be right than happy. So just keep that in mind whenever you're writing a sentence. So once again, just to make sure, semicolon, two definitions. It can be used to separate independent clauses, which is what this sentence says, or it can be used to separate items where commas are being used. Commas we can use to list things, and if we're listing something, the only time we're going to really be using a semicolon is if within that